Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Nintendo DS-XXXL. Now with this it's powered by the JSAUX FlipGo Monitors and specifically the 13.5-inch touch monitors. Now the idea behind this was basically just kind of upscaling the DS or 3DS experience about maybe 3, 4, 5 times, I don't know, I'm not a mathematician, but anyway, we'll get into it. I want to give a huge shout out to UGreen just for supporting the channel over its lifetime. Specifically though, they wanted me to shout out their Qi2 certified 15-watt wireless charger. This will provide a 0 to 30% charge for the iPhone 15 Pro in just 30 minutes, and it'll charge the iPhone 16 Pro Max just over 1.5 times. It also does have a built-in stand if you want to watch movies and stuff like that on the plane. Now, the Uno Power Bank 30-watt USB-C version does provide a 60% charge to the 15 Pro in 30 minutes, as well as having USB A and C outputs, and for the iPhone 15 Pro it will charge it 2 times. Now, going to the Uno 6-in-1 USB-C hub, this does have a USB-C pass-through charging of 100 watts, HDMI at 4K 60, 2 USB 3A slots at 3.2 Gen 2, and 2 USB-C slots at the same speed. Now, this is all done with a happy face as well on the Uno brand, so if you're looking for some holiday Black Friday deals or some last-minute kind of stocking stuffer ideas, why not check out the links for UGreen below. Now, if you're kind of wondering the reason behind the madness for this, honestly, I just kept getting commission sales for the FlipGo monitors for the affiliate link program with JSAUX that they have, and I just get a small commission off of sales if people use my affiliate links. But this isn't something I've ever had or featured on the channel or even advertised about or talked about publicly. I've tried to get one in the past during the review phases and stuff like that, but I missed out on it because I got in at the tail end of the kickstarting program. So going through it, I figured there had to be something special about it. So what we have here is the FlipGo 13.5, but they do have different models with various specs. So the FlipGo Pro is more MacBook oriented and the FlipGo Touch is more Windows oriented. And then there's a FlipGo non-touch or light version that I don't have as well. So the FlipGo 13.5 inch comes in the Pro, Touch, non-touch, and it does have a 3.2 aspect ratio at 400 nits. Now the FlipGo 16 comes in Pro and Touch only, and it has a 16:10 aspect ratio at 500 nits. Now the FlipGo 15.6 is their light model, they call it, and this comes in with the 16:9 aspect ratio at only 250 nits, and this is more of their kind of budgeted oriented one. Now these are all 60 Hertz. The 13.5 inch comes at 2256 by 1504. The 16 inch comes at 2560 by 1600, and the 15.6 inch comes at 1920 by 1080, and those are all resolutions respectively. Now the model purchased that I have here is the 13.5 inch touch version. Now hardware used that you'll see is the iNeo Flip. This is the 7840U version, but any PC with USB PD and DisplayPort out will work. Now if you do have a controller, this will make it work a lot better. Software used was Citra-QT, MelonDS, and Nintendo 3DS and DS ROMs were used as well. So FlipGo Touch specific quirks, the only thing really is you do have to calibrate it through Windows to enable the touch panels. Once you get that set up, JSAUX does have a quick little reference guide and video, I believe, on how to do it, but it's basically just one quick little command line to open up a specific window, or you can do it manually and get through the touch calibration that way. So you can have on-screen touch controls, and I did find various softwares to do it. However, I did not want to mess with the iNeo controls and install any of this stuff, because I know in the past of using stuff like Handheld Companion or Vigium Bus Driver, those sorts of tools that mess with virtual control emulators will permanently kind of mess with your handheld sometimes, even if you uninstall the software correctly, and I really didn't feel like messing around with that. So for all this, I'm just using an Xbox controller, and that's basically it. So before getting into the emulation portion, I fully acknowledge that these monitors are absolutely not meant for gaming purposes, especially because they're 60 Hertz monitors. There's nothing super spectacular about them in terms of gaming feature wise. The Windows does report them to feature FreeSync, but I can't seem to get it to actually work, so I wouldn't actually think and worry about that. In the menu system it does say FreeSync and VRR, but again, it just doesn't seem to ever work. So I'm just gonna think that it doesn't exist. As well, there is no onboard speakers to these panels. which typically is for the best because I do have a UPerfect monitor that does have built-in speakers to it, and it's similar size, like thinness and portable monitor, and they're just horrendous. Even at max volume, like my cell phone at a quarter volume blows it out of the water in terms of loudness and clarity. So realistically, you wouldn't really ever be using these things for anything serious, and especially in loud environments, they would be rendered useless. So to save costs, hopefully they just vouch to not go for it, so I can get behind that. Now, going into the emulation specifics, 3DS emulation is actually a pretty solid way to play this, especially when you're upscaling the resolution. Now, the iNeo Flip, it can do about 3 to 4 times resolution upscaling on certain games. Seeing with the heavyweight one, like Metal Gear Solid 3 here, we're only able to go 3 times resolution scaling, whereas lighter titles, we're obviously able to go up much higher. So, you know, you can play with each game and just play with the resolutions if you're planning on actually doing it this way. So with the controller, you are free to press the buttons on the bottom screen with your fingers and use it as a touch interface because it just renders it as a mouse input, and that's all that the Citra emulation is looking for, is just a mouse input on whatever you're touching. So if you're going to open up your map or use an item in a certain game, you can just touch it, take your hand off a controller for 2 seconds, and you know, it's actually a pretty okay way to experience these DS games, albeit it's at a clunky and overscaled, very overscaled PlayStation, right? So going to Citra-QT allows for the second window mode. However, the second window can't be full screen, so you can full screen the main top screen, but you can't full screen the bottom screen. You can do a bordered full screen, so you'll get the top bar at the top. However, there was a couple times where I was able to press the full screen key and it did full screen the bottom screen, and then I would click on the top screen and then full screen that, and then both of my screens would be full. So I don't know if there is something I'm doing wrong, but just expect to have that sort of issue with this, but just be thankful that you actually can separate the windows in the emulation, because as we'll get to the MelonDS for the original Nintendo DS, you aren't able to do that. If you do want to actually do this and get a solid #1 preferred kind of way to play, I would recommend going for a controller with gyro control, because the 3DS did have gyroscopic controls. However, as you can see here in Metal Gear Solid, going over the tree trunk here, we can see that if there's no gyro input, then it just levels it as dead zero. So 9 times out of 10, I think that's what it was used for, but there's games that used it for balance purposes, or aiming purposes rather. But like in Metal Gear Solid here, I could just walk forward and I didn't have to worry about falling off the branch. So it has its pluses, I guess. Now, as alluded to earlier, the original Nintendo DS using MelonDS is a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, it does provide the options to upscale your resolution through OpenGL and various other tweaks and control options. However, you cannot separate the 2 screens, so you'll only ever get your Nintendo DS screens as one. This is not very ideal because it'll try to scale them to both the same size or at least the same width, and that's not how it was on the original DS. It was significantly smaller then. So the smaller screen, or the second screen, will often look overstretched or oversized and just look very wonky, even when utilizing a high level of upscaling to the resolution. So when you're actually looking on the top screen or main monitor, if you're playing a game that is focused on the main screen, it's a very enjoyable experience. And again, here, when you're using a controller with it and then using your touch or mouse, you can use the bottom screen as a touch interface on the JSAUX FlipGo. So again, same with the 3DS Citra emulation. All you would have to do is just take one hand off of a controller for a split second or two, or if you're doing something like a map organization or inventory, you can do it right there with your fingers. It's pretty okay. It's a pretty good, decent way to play it. It's a very stupid way to play it, albeit, it's not very friendly to Nintendo DS emulation, and it's definitely not as useful as the 3DS emulation of being able to actually separate those 2 screens. But when you have things stretched out and then pulled out and made it look okay split across the 2 screens, it can actually be a pretty enjoyable experience. Again, it's not going to be obviously the best way to play it, and the best way to play it would be on the native hardware itself, or quite honestly on something like the iNeo Flip DS like I have here, because it's more situationally appropriate, I would say. This is just kind of like a fun little stupid why not experiment. Let's see if we can do it. Now, with all the kidding aside about goofing around and playing Nintendo DS games on an oversized dual screen monitor setup, albeit it's actually a pretty pleasurable experience. There are some real world uses that you can use this monitor for. So it does come with a magnetic mounting system on the back, and that's really the only way that you can get something like a VESA arm mount, because I had to buy the magnetic VESA adapter mount and then adapt that to my control arm on my desk. There is other various mounts like a stand that you can get and just kind of use that anywhere you please. So that's what your main kind of use case with this is going to be around. That does come with a mini little metal stand that is okay, but it doesn't really offer much angle or variety. So for real world uses, the coding and programming, although I hate both equally with a passion, it's just not my forte and I just hate it royally. It would be pretty useful for those professions or even side professions, side hobbies, especially if you're on the go, because this is basically the same size or less than the equivalent screen laptop, but you get 2 screens. So if you bring that along with your laptop and a small little charger, there you go, you get 3 decent sized screens to work with that are pretty slim and easy to pack in a backpack. So you do get all that real estate. For virtual machines, it would allow for monitoring of multiple machines, keeping your main screen clear for like your kind of real world tasks that you're actually focused on, instead of having to kind of alt tab through or maybe split the screen. Especially if you have a smaller screen laptop, doing split screen kind of task work isn't always the greatest, and even at 16-inch laptop screen, it's not always the greatest either. So if you're somebody that craves that kind of dual screen laptop setup, this is actually a really good workflow situation. And finally, there is also use for work from home, or I guess like kind of service center calls. So it would allow for multiple like chat windows or service logs and reference materials that you could parse through while you're doing your jobs, your troubleshooting, whatever you're up to. And then finally, for video editors, it's obviously easy to kind of pack up and go. Like I already said, it's relatively color accurate for the Pro models and the Touch models, and for timelines and other software, stuff like that running, it would be very easy to go through, and having that touch control could actually be pretty convenient, especially for kind of like soundboard type stuff. So there really is a lot of actually kind of convenient real world uses that you would actually use this FlipGo monitor setup, not just for stupid Nintendo DS emulation for the lols, but you know, whatever. Finally, to wrap it all up and take it a little bit more seriously, is it worth it? Yes and no. It's impressively slim and light, and it matches or exceeds similar laptops in that size. It's expensive, both the screens themselves as well as the accessories that you will undoubtedly need to buy if you want to get any sort of real world use out of this. If you want to buy the monitor arm stand, or if you want to buy the VESA adapter mount kit, the magnetic mount kit, you know, you just have to invest a lot of money into these. And it is from an unproven brand. You know, they are new to the monitor space, JSAUX. They're not new to the consumer electronics or consumer accessories, but this isn't usually their forte. As well, it is only 60 hertz on these screens. So again, it's not meant for gaming oriented tasks, obviously, but again, 60 hertz is still not the most pleasurable thing to view, even when watching just videos or scrolling content on it. However, it does give you loads of space. You can either make them one giant screen, you can make them separate screens like I usually do. They do have the Mac friendly versions and the Pro versions, and you know, it takes up almost no space in your backpack, equivalent to a laptop. But again, mentioned with the magnetic mounting system, it is weak, non-reassuring. You know, I just, every time I walk past it, I feel like it's gonna fall off, or if I bump my table that it's very slightly attached to, it's gonna fall off. You know, I'm really worried about it, so I do have everything kind of situationally positioned to make sure that if it does fall, it's not going to do a whole lot of damage to itself. Now, also the mini HDMI, mini HDMI, you know, built-in KVN, super nice. No touch when using HDMI, obviously, because it can't send the data back and forth. But even if you were able to use HDMI and then USB-C for data, you can't do that. It has to be through eDisplayPort. Personally, I'm not upset with my purchase. I do see why people buy these things, and I do see why people would fall in love with this kind of form factor and setup. It's not an easy recommend due to the price, obviously, but factoring you get 2 portable screens, and very decent screens at that, for color and for brightness in terms of how slim they are, the price is pretty justified, I would say. Now, with all that being said, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts on this. Are you buying one of these? Do you think you want one of these? Have you been looking into the one of these? Are you waiting for the next generation of them if they do succeed, or if they do continue making this product line, or are you just unsure because it's from an unproven brand in the monitor space? Obviously, it's stupid as a DS emulator. That's not really what I was trying to prove in this video, that this is why you should buy one. It's a very nice side use for it, especially for laptops that don't come with a touchscreen built in like my laptop. It would be nice to have something like this to get some sort of touch functionality, especially if you are a high touch user. Now, finally, I would like to give a shout out to Handhelds United. That's the YouTube kind of Discord podcast group that we have with a bunch of handheld creators in the space. So if you want to get joined up there and interact with us in the community, feel free to follow the links below. Again, there's any relevant links below. You can follow those for the affiliate links to the FlipGo and any UGreen products that I've used and featured here. And finally, as always, thanks for watching. Hope you all have a great day.